Hey everyone, and welcome to your second lecture for week two of technical writing. I guess I'll try to keep this one a little bit short because I know that the first one went a little bit long. But this lecture covers information for two of your assignments this week. One of which will ask you to tailor my syllabus down to a single page, and the other we'll talk about expertise and what that means. And I'll ask you to think about that for yourself as well, and for what it means for how you communicate also. Yeah, let me share our slideshow again. Um, yeah, today we'll talk about audience analysis and tailoring a message. So some of this should just be review, and then the rest of it should be new info that'll help you throughout the class. So if you took English 110, which I is a prerequisite for this course, so you must have, this should feel a little bit familiar to you, is the rhetorical situation. So I just wanted to bring these up. So we talked about techniques, we talked about strategies. As part of the technical writing composition process, this is now like a big kind of umbrella picture of everything going on. So again, trying to cover a lot in just a short amount of time, but if you're visualizing it in your head, the first week was techniques. We talked in the first lecture about strategy. Now this is like the really big picture, zooming out from just the writing itself and thinking kind of broadly. So in any rhetorical situation, which means anytime you're going to talk, anytime you're going to write, anytime you're going to communicate, really at all, you've got this situation going on, and the situation is composed of many parts. And so here are the most important parts to think about in terms of technical communication for sure. The first is the source, right? That's you in this case. If you're going to write something up, you want to think about your biases, your expertise, who you are, and consider that deeply. The next thing is the message itself. So for me, for thinking about the rhetorical situation of this lecture, we could say the message is understanding the rhetorical situation, going through some parts of audience analysis and expertise. And that's the full message itself. So whether I wrote this up on a piece of paper, just did maybe a podcast and talked about it, or in this case now I'm doing a video with a lecture, that will always be the message. And so what I just did there was talked about different channels I could go through. And so your channel is always going to affect how people receive what you're talking about. I like to do these online classes with a video component and a PowerPoint so that you know I'm a real live professor here interacting with your work and trying to teach. I like to do a PowerPoint just to keep myself organized and on track. So I think it's the best channel to do these. But in any other piece of communication, you might think about those other things I said. Is it better to just write something down and deliver it that way? Is it better to do podcast and just think about audio or just be on the radio? So those are all the different channels you might think about using. Other ones we've talked about in this course are kind of the YouTube video. You see me break those down a couple times and talk about those as pieces of technical writing, but yeah, those are all different channels. I have a quote here. You might have heard this in the past. The medium is the message. So this was from a communication scholar named Marshall McLuhan, from I think over 50 years ago now. But this is a cliche you'll hear sometimes that yeah, that channel or that medium you decide to communicate, that's going to carry a really important part of the message to the reader, if it comes to them in a letter, in a newspaper, if it comes by radio. For McLuhan, these are really gonna really heavily affect the message, and how you can deliver it. And so that's kind of shortened as the medium is the message. So something to think about for sure. Um, Receiver, that's the person who's going to listen to your communication. I have some notes on audience analysis that we'll get to in just a second for how we might think about the receiver. But here are some other parts of the rhetorical situation that maybe sometimes don't always really get talked about. Like this might be, you might have definitely heard these before, but maybe not this line. Feedback in technical writing, a really good part of the profession and the craft of technical writing is that you're always supposed to be in conversation with your user. I'll talk about that a little bit in the next lecture. But feedback, you can always get a sense of what the audience is understanding. If you communicate on a website, for example, A lot of times you can see how many people have visited, what kind of content they're clicking on. If we think about my YouTube videos as lectures here, I get to see how many viewers there were. So if there are less than 12 viewers, then I know that that someone's not listening, and maybe I'm not being exciting enough. And so I want to make sure that I take that feedback and I start to alter my communication to get my audience back. The environment, this refers to the actual physical environment of a message. So for me, I use my office in my house to do these lectures. I hope it presents a kind of professional background, except for the Pokemon over here. If you noticed, Pikachu fell asleep this week. He doesn't think it's very exciting, but basically, yeah, the physical environment. I like to use my office because I think it's where I do my work, and it's a good place to communicate about work and these things that I'm thinking about. So it really works for me. But you can imagine that maybe this message would land differently if I was like propped up in bed and you could see, my comforter behind me and things like that. You might think a little bit differently about me as a communicator. The context, this is now like the metaphorical environment. And so like what context did I enter when I'm talking about things? For me, you can think about I entered the YouTube community because that's where we're posted. You could think he's communicating in 2025. What kinds of things are going on in the world that affect his context that way? So these are all bigger kind of questions you can ask about that go beyond just that physical environment. What's been in the news recently? How are other people talking about technical communication? These are all my context. And then interference, anything that might interfere with your communication. In today's world with all our phones and everything like that, almost everything that's being communicated to us, we're getting a new notification over here. We're getting new information over there, and so it's not a very smooth process anymore to communicate. There's always a lot going on. And I should say, before I go to the next slide on environment, you think about these in terms of both the source, so for me, my physical environment, but also for the receiver, right? When I'm sitting around preparing these lectures, I saw some people commented that they're happy they're chunked into just kind of 15-minute pieces because it makes it easier to follow along with. That's something I have to consider, right? We're not during the summer, we're not all on campus together. I think about you all, maybe getting a few minutes to listen to these lectures, maybe on break at work. Maybe some of you are, at your desk or at your dorm, and it is a more traditional learning environment. But maybe some of you, go somewhere else to live for the summer. Maybe some of you are on like the lifeguard stand right now, just listening to the lecture. So these are all things you have to consider when you're a technical writer. Is where's my audience gonna receive these things? Which again. Maybe in the past, that was easier to do because you had a little bit more of a controlled environment and things weren't online. But for me, yeah, right now I could be reaching you pretty much anywhere. So it's just something to think about when you're, yeah, like I said, thinking more broadly about your technical communication and how you describe it. And so as we're using our discussions on Canvas, make sure to think about these words. They're nice. Nice thoughts, nice vocab to use when you're composing responses and things like that. So yeah, here are some ways to understand your audience. I basically have two. This one comes from another textbook also. This is actually, I'm pretty sure this is a business writing textbook, but it's a good way to understand your audience, which gets back to that receiver part here. And actually, it does get into the context and environment too. But yeah, demographic questions. What is their general demographic? What is their level of knowledge concerning the topic I'm about to talk about? Those really affect, what medium I can use for sure. Right? Like if this was a course for maybe people in the 60 over crowd, maybe they would prefer to have like a longer written document about the lecture instead of just a YouTube video. Something that's more, relevant to them or to see it kind of written out, in some kind of journalistic way. And level of knowledge, right? You see me bringing up these PowerPoints, but breaking down pretty much every line to try to explain it to people who are learning technical writing. And so I know at least one student in our course, I forget who it was off the top of my head, but mentioned taking technical writing before. And so, that's, one audience member to think about for me also. And I say all that to say, this is how you can think about your writing and communication. And then relational questions. What's my relationship to the audience, right? So in this case, I know I'm your professor, so you get to speak with a little bit of authority, and I've got your attention for the lecture because you kind of have to watch it. So, there's relationships there. But yeah, it might be different if you're writing for customers, if you're writing for your friends, but they still need instructions or directions. These are things to consider when you're composing a piece of tech writing. Um, and lastly, yeah, what's my audience members' relationship with one another? If you picture all users pretty much being the same, maybe they all post online together, then maybe there's collaboration that can go on beyond your tech writing, but maybe you're writing very specialized instruction for a piece of equipment that maybe only a couple scientists around the world will use. And so you need to be very particular, very specific, and very thorough and detailed. So those are things to think about. Here are the kind of types of audience that you can break down into. This comes directly from your textbook, the Gross and All textbook online. They say there's four different kinds of audience members. There's experts who know a business or an organization inside and out. You can kind of communicate anything to them, and they'll know where it belongs and where it operates. There are technicians. These are the people that build, operate, maintain, and repair the items the experts design and theorize about. So as these people have a big kind of umbrella picture understanding of the organization, maybe there are technicians that come in and put in more specific detail for day-to-day operations. And then there's executives, there's decision makers, right? Maybe I know for sure that a particular manual needs to be written in a particular way. But one of the experts disagrees with me, then the executive can kind of step in and decide maybe who's right or which direction we're going to go. And then non-specialists, they say this is kind of your secondary audience. I'm not sure I entirely agree with that. I think sometimes non-specialists are going to be your primary audience, right? Like I just said for these lectures that I'm lecturing for people learning technical writing. So non-specialists are always in your audience as well. Another textbook, this is the one you've seen me talk about a couple times. They just say your audiences are either technical, semi-technical, and non-technical, and those are kind of exactly what they sound like, right? Some people are going to know everything about your expertise, everything about your hobby, or whatever it is you're going to communicate, and you can use really specific words to them that you don't need to define. But sometimes you're going to have a semi-technical audience who maybe knows some of the stuff you're talking about, but not everything. And so you have to communicate with them in a different way. And then, of course, yeah, like I said, that non-specialist or non-technical, where you're going to have to kind of break down every piece of every definition you say and every kind of step individually. So yeah, those are big audience type questions. You can think about demographics, relationships. You can think about what they know, how much they know, um, and maybe even how they came to know that. But yeah, just some small pieces of audience analysis to think about, especially because one of your assignments this week is going to be tailoring a piece of technical writing. So I'm giving you some strategies you can use right now for that assignment. To tailor a piece of technical writing, sometimes you need to add information. You can maybe think that the original communication you received was not clear enough, so you need to go in and add some details. Um, you can remove information. That's kind of the opposite, right? I got a bunch of info and I think it's too much, so I'm going to cut it down. You could do further research to find out more about the topic if you have to tailor something maybe you're not an expert in. You can change examples, change metaphors. Sometimes you hear people say, "Hey, this is like that other thing," and you don't always agree that it's comparable. So you can change up metaphors, you can change examples. You can modify the organization and architecture. We saw the coding page from last lecture. Maybe if you're into computer science, maybe hey, wait, I think a better way would be to learn different statements in different orders. And so you can start, moving things around and just changing the order that things appear in. You can provide summaries. So instead of having a really big piece of information that goes on pages and pages, maybe to tailor it down, you just write a paragraph that explains everything quickly. Change sentence lengths. You can make them shorter, as we saw in the syllabi rewrites, which I think pretty much always works, but maybe sometimes you have to add a little bit more detail. You can add and subtract graphics. Like I said, sometimes there can be too many graphics in a document and you want to get rid of some. But sometimes the document's not clear and you need to add stuff. So yeah, those are some ideas. And then redesign the document, like I talked about at the end of last lecture. You saw the grid layouts and maybe maybe you see one grid that's not working and you want to like design it in a new way. Those are all ways you can tailor a piece of technical writing. So I put that at the end of this lecture to put it within the context of all this. So as you are tailoring, think about what the message is and what you need to retain. Think about the context, like what kind of students are in the course, and of course all these other things as well. So yeah, those two pieces of info there that are most important are yeah, thinking about what makes an expert, what makes someone technical or semi-technical or not technical. And then yeah, thinking about how do you tailor a message because those will be your two assignments for the week. But yeah, so that's all for this lecture. Thanks for listening. You'll have one more this week, and yeah, I really appreciate your effort. Thanks.